Corruption is apparently fine as long as you do it in public. Um, Meanwhile, the White House is basically breaking in half. And it's literal this time. And there's all sorts of indicators on the economy and Trump's approval ratings. So, with that, welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of us who vote for progress in pretty much every election and want to welcome our friends and family into the majority. Ravi, can you tell from that intro that I accidentally deleted the outline about 1 second into saying it and had to do it from memory?
I was going to say, you are right. Well, let me start with the great news. I'm trying to get our audience a little bit more hyped up to care because I feel like we've been so doom and gloom. And I try to start every episode now with something that can make people hopeful. And here's one piece of news that's very interesting, which is Donald Trump's approval rating has fallen to minus 18 in the Economist tracker, which kind of pulls together all polling. It's the lowest it has ever been, including in his first term. And the line by line here is very interesting. 282 days into his term, the president is down even 1.3 points since last week. He's at 39% approved, 57% disapproved, 5% not sure. And issue by issue, it's extreme. And we have a graphic on this. It's pretty bad. Like, you look at the biggest is on inflation and prices, but even on immigration, he's net negative now. He went from basically plus 10 on immigration to minus 10 now. Taxes and spending, jobs in the economy went from positive to deep negative. Jobs in the economy now negative 20. And so this is a president who, at least when it comes to popularity, is in crisis. And obviously he's not acting like that. He's saying he has the best numbers ever or whatever, but this should tell us something. It's like, if we can hold on and get to these next two elections, we've got a deeply unpopular president and a deeply unpopular party.
Negative 20 on the economy is a lot of negatives on the economy. I mean, because look, there's all sorts of stuff that you and I and the people listening to this are upset about in terms of what's going on right now in the country. But a couple of things here. One, every election, as we know, tends to turn on how the economy is doing. And if he's 20 points underwater on the economy, that's very bad for Republicans. And on top of that, this president was elected in an election that turned on the economy, where he was promising to fix the economy.
Yeah, he's even underwater in Texas. If you go to the Economist article, you can go state by state and you'll see it. He's underwater a lot when it comes to all voters. He's even underwater on voters who turned out for the last presidential election. And so this is bad for the Republicans. And Jason, like, it's worth noting that we haven't even seen the recession yet that a lot of people are predicting. So that recession could come any point in the next few years. This is just people feeling bad about the economy before there's a recession. So if there is a recession, which obviously nobody knows whether it comes or not, but there's at least a decent possibility of such, then you could see like things like numbers we've never seen before. And like the Economist compares it even to Biden, to Obama and all that. And like, let's face it, Biden was not popular at this point in his presidency. Trump is less popular than Biden was at this point. If you remember, Biden was coming off of that summer with the Afghanistan, you remember, but the Afghanistan stuff, basically his numbers never recovered from that. Trump was worse than that already.
Yeah. And before people, just to temper excitement a little bit, what people need to remember is that in 2020, Trump lost re-election, but we were all stuck in our houses from a pandemic that he was actively screwing up, and it was hurting the economy. So to your point about he's negative 20 on the economy, and will that matter in the midterm? Yes, it will matter in the midterm, but nobody should sit back and say, okay, he's negative 20 on the economy, we're good, because what it took last time for us to soundly beat him in election was for him to have really bad numbers in the economy and for all of us to be stuck in our houses with a deadly virus going around killing people that we were all afraid of. Like, that's what it took last time.
I mentioned this less because I think that we could take it to the bank, but because I think complacency is like not even in the picture. If anything, despondency is our bigger problem.
Yes, we're on that opposite end. And I was out last week, but I did listen to the episode you and Steven did, and it made me feel better. So I think
that's all I'm trying to do here.
Yeah,
it's coach talk here. It's like we're down 20 at halftime, and I'm like, look, We got to go out there. Like
You're
you got to
clear
keep,
hearts
you got to
or
keep
clear
believing.
eyes, full hearts.
You got to keep believing.
Yeah.
As you know, speaking of, some hard times here, the Trump grift is getting out of control. Reuters with some helpful reporting here, showing that the Trump family raked in more than 800 million in sales of crypto assets in the first half of 2025 alone. Jake Tapper asked Representative Comer, who is, I think, chairs the oversight committee or whatever we call it, about this. And here's what Representative Comer had to say.
Today on the Trump family's crypto ventures. Based on the family's own financial disclosures, Reuters found the Trump organization's income from the first half of this year shot from $51 million to $864 million. About $800 million of that is from crypto. And the story details how most of the buyers are foreign investors and how all this money is going to belong to Trump when he leaves office. Is this something that you're going to look into at all?
Well, it's something that we are, like you, reading about this. We're trying to digest it. The difference between the way the Trump family is operating and the Biden family is they're admitting they're doing this. The president campaigned as a business guy. I'm not defending the policy. I think there needs to be ethics reforms. And I had a bill that Jamie Raskin killed last session because he thought that Kamala Harris was going to win the presidency, but it would have increased the disclosure. So as long as you disclose your income and disclose the sources, I think that's acceptable. If you lie about the income, you say, I never received money from China, and then we subpoena your bank records and there's $5 million from China, I think that's a problem. So, I think it's a legitimate question. A lot of people are concerned, especially since the crypto industry isn't regulated. But if my position now is as long as the president's disclosing this, and they're filling out disclosures and they're answering questions. He answers questions about it. If you ask him about his crypto, he'll say, yes, they've got the best crypto country in the world. Now, do the voters like that? I think that's going to be an issue in the next presidential election. I think it's a fair question. But from an ethics standpoint and from an oversight standpoint, the president is disclosing this income, and that, I think, is the most important part, the transparency.
All right, we're out of time. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer.
Okay, so much to unpack there, which is why you'll notice from the outline, I wanted Jeremy to play that entire clip. Let's start at the beginning. First of all, this idea that Biden got $5 million from China is just a thing he's saying. No one ever proved that. In fact, there's no evidence of that at all. Okay, let's stipulate to that for a moment. It's $800 million just from this one grift.
And he's saying did Trump disclose this? Am I missing something here? Like, what is he talking about?
No, it's just in the paper.
Oh yeah, because Reuters reported on it, then he's disclosed it. Now, so what he's saying is, if China straight up sent, like, let's say you could take China out of it, Vietnam, as may have happened, is like, hey, here's a golf course and a hotel. Can you lower our tariffs? That's fine with Comer as long as we're all aware that this is what's going on. That's his argument. Right.
Now, what he's doing there is and then he goes on to say, it's the transparency that's important. Dishonesty would be a problem. And he even says that's acceptable as long as you are disclosing it. No, it's not. That's not how the law works.
By the way,
that's not how ethics work.
If he's right, then why don't we have a video of our ICE guy taking a bag of money?
Right.
Isn't disclosure important?
If that were okay, I could kill anyone I want as long as I'm like, yeah, I did it.
Well, here's the unfortunate reality. Man. Because of the Supreme Court being what they are, there's probably legally nothing we can do to Trump on a lot of this stuff because it's a quote unquote official act. If Vietnam is like, here's a golf course, lower the tariffs, the lowering the tariffs is the official act. So I guess that's fine, even though the part of it that's private, which is him getting a private benefit, this is all stuff that we litigated by a court that is, shall we say, a little motivated to see things the way Trump wants things. But I do think this is important to get on the record. And this happens in the context of Trump pardoning the head of Binance.
Well, hold on. Before we get to that, I want to because that's important. But before we go there, I want to set the stage for the argument that he's making, and it's in the last part of the clip. And he's saying it's acceptable. He's saying everything is out there in front of everybody, and then he finishes by saying, and that's, whether voters are going to like it is a whole separate thing, which I know I'm a broken record. I've said this on the show before. That is the center, like bullseye of republicanism, right? And that is that if the market and or the voters like accept it, if it makes it past the test, like if people buy your product, then there's nothing wrong with what you're doing. Or if people reelect you, then you are therefore validated and it is no longer unethical. That's
I mean, layer on a nice
philosophy and ethics, right?
But let's slather on a little Orwellian. Well, Biden, this doesn't apply to Biden because he didn't win. Also, when the numbers aren't good, we're going to fire the head of the BLS so that the numbers change. So even if the market is telling us something, we're not going to know about it, right? So and his
BS thing that he just threw out there, the Orwellian, just throwing out there the idea that so he's the chair now, and Jamie Raskin is the ranking member. Before, I think Raskin was the chair, he was the ranking member, and so he just throws out there a thing that I am certain is not true, which is he had an ethics bill that would have stopped all of this, but Raskin thought that Kamala Harris was going to be president, so he stopped the ethics bill from passing.
You mean Kamala? Is what you mean?
Yeah, is how he referred to her. Yes.
So yeah, there's a whole thing here which we need to go into, which is like, even if you buy their premise that everybody has done this, there's this thing that they do where they create a Frankenstein of all their imagined sins that every president has ever done. Lincoln did this, and he declared martial law, and FDR packed the courts, and Biden was like taking bags of money from the Chinese, and they basically have created a Frankenstein of all of the imagined flaws of every president, and they're like, we're going to supersize all of them into us and use them for an excuse for being total assholes on every possible issue. And if you have these people in your life who are making these arguments, just on a person-to-person level, be like, do you sit your kids down and say, hey, look in your class and see everything every kid is getting away with and try to do that thing and then some? Is that what you say to your kids? Of course not. Now,
it's like when you see a movie and it's like, based on a true story, but like let's say it's a World War II movie and they take like one mission and then they put every bad thing that happened in the war into like one person's experience. And you're like, makes for a great movie, but you're not like, that's obviously what the experience of being in that war was like. Like that's what they're doing, except with bad behavior over the entire course of American presidential.
And the thing is, we'd be fine, honestly, if we're actually what the presidents had done. Like, even if they did just the things that they say that all the other presidents have done, we'd actually be okay. The problem is they're exaggerating all the things that all the presidents have done. Sooner or later, they're going to be keeping slaves at the White House, and they're going to be like, hey, we had that.
God,
it's not that far.
Well, Al Franken always says Donald Trump is the worst human being to ever be president, and that includes a bunch of people who owned slaves.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, we all know if Trump lived during that time, let's not even kid ourselves.
Yeah.
Okay. Trump pardoned this guy, CZ, who's the head of Binance, and the Wall Street Journal reported that the Trump family crypto venture, which they report has generated $4.5 billion since the 2024 election, was helped by a partnership under the radar with Binance. So this guy basically...
Oh, under the radar? I thought it was all being done out in... Anyway, go ahead.
So basically this guy, and honestly, like, wouldn't you, if you were this guy, facing charges...
That is quite a hairline. That guy looks like a villain.
Yeah, and like, look, I don't know a lot about like this guy and like what he did.
I know that he and Stephen Miller have the same doctor.
We could talk about his charges in a little bit. It's like, it's one of those things where I don't want to exaggerate it, but he definitely wasn't policing bad behavior on his platform, and there was certain illicit activity that was going on his platform, including, I think, Hamas and others like were funneling money into places they shouldn't.
Well, according to the article, what he said to his employees about their approach to U.S. law was better to ask for forgiveness than permission, which I guess turns out he was right.
And look, like, I don't want to exaggerate. Uber and people like this do, like, that's how they talk too. Like, but the guy like was convicted, I think, or either pled or was convicted. And and the problem isn't this guy alone, right? Like, I don't really care what this guy did, and like I just care that our legal system is fair and transparent, and that people aren't bribing the president to get pardons. That's what I care about. So I'm less focused on this guy than the fact that he was rational and effective in just throwing some money at the president of the United States and getting a pardon. That's the thing that concerns me. And basically what this does is open the door for anybody. Like if you're a criminal attorney and I've actually had these conversations with criminal attorneys where they say that they would advise, and I'm not going to embarrass anybody, but including a Democratic friend of mine who has clients who are in the crypto industry who have faced scrutiny, and he has advised people, I won't say exactly what, but what you'd imagine would happen, like throw some money at this, and you don't, like, obviously you don't have to say, I'm giving you this money for the pardon. Although I wouldn't be shocked if that's happening.
No, not at all.
All you have to do is throw money at the Trump crypto scheme or whatever, and then
family. You buy stuff.
Yeah, and then have the right person be like, hey, we're a friend. That's what you say. And that's it. And then that, seems pretty effective strategy.
Well, I thought, you and Stephen did a really good job last week of taking what Senator Schatz had said about the comparisons of the Trump corruption and what it's costing, and then the decisions that the government is making, and encouraging people to put those at the centerpiece of their argument. And so my point here is that you can make an argument about the Trump administration being corrupt all day long. And if it doesn't affect people's lives, what they've demonstrated is they don't care, right? I mean, in fact, Trump gets elected because just a very slim, not even a majority, but a plurality, but a slim amount more people come to the conclusion than not that, well, he is corrupt, he's a bad person, he's all those things, but him being in office probably is a net benefit to me and my family, right? Or to the things I care about politically. And
right.
This, he won the last election because just a few more people than not believed that. Well, this only runs in the face of that if you frame it as such. So like what Schatz was saying, what you and Stephen were saying last week is you have to say things like, okay, he's made all this money and he's done all these things, but in the process, he has not lowered the price for you. But you have to go further than that. You have to do things like, we're going to talk about the White House destruction in a few minutes. That cost this amount of money. He cut this amount of money from something that matters to you. $40 billion is going to Argentina, probably because
more than the savings from Doge, all that chaos.
Right.
We've
taken what was supposedly savings from foreign aid that keeps us out of entanglement, saves people's lives.
You get kids starving in Malaysia, which I know is like not an election issue for people who are supposed to be good Christians or whatever, right? Or whatever you are.
And he's spent more than that entire budget on screwing the farmers of America by giving it to another country, right? So, that it is important that anytime, listeners, you talk about Trump's corruption, you tie it to a way in which they are getting screwed.
Yep. Well, we're going to take a break before we go. I mentioned this last week, but I'm starting a writing group for 2026. It's a writing workshop called Analog, and it's all about finishing. So it's for people who like you writing and maybe want to write a novel, a screenplay, whatever. We're going to hear from industry people, publishers, great writers like you. I'm sure you're going to sign up and talk to us. But so for people, go to ravimgupta.com/analog. That's ravimgupta.com/analog. We'll throw it in the show notes too. We're accepting applications on a rolling basis. And I think our deadline is the beginning of December. But if you want to maximize your chances, you want to get that application in quickly. What you had something you were going to add before we go to?
I was going to say, since the outline deleted from my computer and I got it back right at the beginning, what I didn't say is what I'll say now, which is people should stick around because in a few minutes we're going to be joined by David Hogg, who will spend the second half of the episode with us.
We'll get the whole hog, the whole David Hogg. We'll be back. We got a lot to talk about.
When you're buried in credit card and loan debt, it's human nature to put it off and say, I'll deal with it later. If that's you, here's a hidden fact the debt strategy experts at Done With Debt shared with me. They discovered a little-known strategy that works in your favor to dramatically reduce or even erase your debt altogether. They aggressively engage everyone you owe money to this fall, and here's why. They know which lenders and credit card companies are doing year-end accounting and need to cut deals. They even know which ones have year-end audits and need to get your debt off their books. That means you need to get started with Done With Debt now, this fall. Done with Debt accomplishes this without bankruptcy or new loans. In fact, most clients end up with more money in their pocket the first month. Get started now while you still have time. Go to donewithdebt.com and talk with one of their specialists for free. Visit donewithdebt.com, donewithdebt.com. Fall is here, and you know what that means. The temps are dropping, but your kitchen's heating up. It's game day spreads, slow simmered stews, and comfort food on repeat. And if your current pans flinch every time they see high heat, you deserve better. Enter Hexclad, the cookware that's as serious about performance as you are about that meat thermometer. This isn't your grandma's nonstick. Hexclad pans give you the perfect sear, crazy durability, and easy cleanup without babying your cookware. Stainless steel strength, toxin-free, nonstick convenience, and yeah, they look damn good sitting on your stovetop. Plus, every Hexclad product is backed by a lifetime warranty. You're not just investing in better tools, you're setting the tone for seasons of cooking to come. Game days are coming. It's time to upgrade your kitchen before hosting season kicks into full gear. Get 10% off at hexclad.com/majority and make sure your spread is as strong as your lineup. Support the show and cook with gear as serious as your passion at hexclad.com/majority. Let Hexclad know we sent you and experience the ultimate upgrade in your kitchen with Hexclad's superior performance.
Well, the shutdown continues. There's reporting in Politico that the Democratic coalition is fraying. I wouldn't say this is bulletproof sourcing, but there are some people on the record, like Dick Durbin, saying that the Federal Employees Union coming out against the shutdown, which is I think,
understandable,
predicted. Like I would imagine that would have been predicted. So, like, look, one could argue on the merits that, hey, like, there's real hardship amongst federal employees and you should take the union seriously, and that's a good reason to end the shutdown or whatever. My point would be, if that's the case, then what are you doing? You should have known that was the case and that the federal employees would face hardship. So I'm not saying I know anything. This is just one series of reports from Politico, and they themselves have stated in their articles that nothing is for sure, but it's just like, it's kind of like people are getting worried and antsy and things are fraying. My only thing there is, make it clear what it is the strategy is. If you're coming out of this and quote unquote backing down, the voters are going to want to know, your supporters are going to want to know what this was all about, and what if you change your tactics or strategy and quote unquote back down, they're either going to need some kind of victory or they're going to need an explanation as to what changed that you didn't know when this started. Because that's what I'm wondering as this is going on. And I don't think it is a done deal that the Democrats are quote unquote going to lose this. And I think one of the people who I think has been talking some of the most sense on the Hill is your friend, Ruben Gallego, who's been on this podcast before. Here's a clip of Ruben.
We can negotiate right now. By the way, how can I negotiate? The president's in Asia for 5 days. Johnson's basically keeping his the House of Representatives out till January to stop, and protect pedophiles. So who am I negotiating with right now? The person I'm talking to right now is everyday Americans who are worried that they're going to have insurance rates doubled overnight because Republicans refuse to act. So they're screwing up on tariffs, they're raising inflation, and now they're going to go ahead and raise your premiums.
The Republicans are refusing to be blackmailed and held hostage into what Democrats want. Mike Johnson doesn't need to do anything.
Well, Democrats, it's what I want is 24 million Americans. I want 24 million Americans to have inflation. No,
okay,
24 million Americans want their insurance.
We're finished.
Healthy and affordable insurance.
I appreciate it.
You too. Have a good one.
Okay.
Have you back.
I love it when at the end when Ruben goes, "Have me back," because he knows he just upset the goose.
Never going to be back.
Yeah, he knows. He's like, "Have me back."
The Democrats are not the only ones fraying. Marjorie Taylor Greene is tweeting at Mike Johnson, making some sense, which Marjorie Taylor Greene has been making more sense than normal lately.
I'm not sure what's happening there. It's really wild.
Well, it's the other side of crazy is that this is like why, I've given you my theory that I think Elon Musk is fake crazy, because whenever whether it's China or Trump or whatever, he falls in line when power is at stake. Like whenever the powerful really call him on his shit. Like, this is, I think, Aaron Ross Sorkin's theory about China is like, if you watch Elon in China, Elon has everything to say about everybody, but will never criticize China because of his business interests there. But Marjorie Taylor Greene is calling out Mike Johnson, also talking about some kind of path on healthcare. She's got a lot of rural voters. She understands what anybody who spent any time in the South understands, which is in these deep red states, especially throughout the deep South. It is the Medicaid patients, the patients who rely on Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, who've seen hospitals closing, who are going to see even more hardship when we hit these cliffs. And she's, I don't want to get in her head, and I don't want to pretend, I don't want to extend any sanity to her in general. But all I'm saying is she's feeling pressure too. So Democrats, like, let's stay strong here. Like, they're facing their own pressures here too.
Marjorie Taylor Greene, if I were to ascribe some sort of logic to the way she's actually acting in a logical way now, would probably be that I think she sees herself as a future governor or senator at some point.
Well, in this world, it's not impossible.
No, especially if she's, starts actually doing stuff that's genuinely populist and not just mean populist, right? Like economic populism that's real, which is what this is. Now, but taking off the just punditry of, what Marjorie Taylor Greene's political future is for a moment. Do you remember when we were having the fight over Obamacare in, 2010 or so? And obviously it was deeply unpopular at the time. They passed it anyway. But one of the arguments that the Republicans were making to each other internally was they were analogizing it to the New Deal. And they were saying that if you expand a government benefit like this and you actually do this, then the problem that you will have is you'll never be able to get rid of it. And that's why they were against it. Well, you got to give them some props, at least on that calculus. Now, you and I think it's great that government benefit got larger and helped some people. But they were right that once you do that, it becomes an expectation and people will not want to see it taken away. And that's what has happened. And so going back to the shutdown thing, the problem that we have here, that the Democrats have, is that it was absolutely, in my opinion, and absolutely is worthy of shutting down the government to try to force the Republicans to compromise and not drastically raise health insurance for upwards of more than 20 million people, and cause people to lose health insurance and that kind of thing. Absolutely worth it. The problem that we're running into now is that they don't care about the government being closed, and Trump in particular seems to like it. And so now the question that is really bubbling to the surface is this actually creating leverage, or is where we're going that they're going to make the very unpopular move of cutting these people's healthcare no matter what we do, and making healthcare more expensive for millions and millions of Americans no matter what we do. And in the meantime, they're working very hard to blame us for the shutdown. And so you may end up at the same place regardless. And that, I think, is the struggle right now.
Well, before we invite David on here, let's quickly dispatch with this White House demolition project. My friend Isaac Saul, Entangled, wrote a really interesting piece where he kind of goes through like the pros and cons of this and all that. And he comes out saying, look, it's actually not that big of a deal. But he, being the journalist that he is, has dissenting voices, including his father, who weighs in at the end of the piece and says, no, you're wrong. This is a big deal. It's really interesting. People should go look at it. It's a nice little piece of journalism. I have to be honest, most of my reaction to this is emotional, not like technical. Like, It's like the White House is like maybe the most important building in American history. So like the idea that you knock down an entire wing of it this quickly without any communication or process, combined with who's doing it, just makes me immediately extremely skeptical of any reasonable argument that could be made given who's doing it and how quickly they're doing it. That's just where I am right now.
What I'll say about it is it's very powerful symbolism for either side. Yes. On Trump's side, it's very powerful symbolism of we're moving fast, we're breaking things, we don't follow the rules, that kind of thing. And on our side, it's very powerful symbolism of chaos and that's mostly it. I mean, it's just that
Yeah.
like just destruction that this administration and that Trump is about destruction of things that are important in America and really nothing else.
And I think like my general instinct on this is I actually want it to be as tacky and crazy as possible, because I want us leading into the next presidential election with Trump giving like celebratory UFC bouts and shit in there with like gold everything, where the average American, like, this is a question of what the limits of the American public are, and in a world where there's a recession and just a gaudy, ridiculous White House ballroom, which you can retrofit that, like, whatever. It's just the guts of the building. Just go in there and change it. Or my idea is, and I don't know if anybody else had this idea, so I apologize if I'm stepping on anybody's ground here, would be the next Democrat to come in, instead of knocking it down, turn it into a monument to all of the corruption in American history as a way to never repeat it. So put up pictures of, like Taft and like, Jefferson with Sally Hemings and like just all the bullshit that has happened in American history that we don't want to repeat, and then throw Trump right up in there and be like, this is the hall of mistakes. And this building is a mistake. All these other things are mistakes. And actually, we're going to hold a lot of meetings in here because we want to be reminded of how fallible and how fragile this country can be. That's what I would do with it. Because who cares? Because we'll be lucky to be in this position. People like just knock it down or whatever. Like whoever wins Democrat is going to have a lot of shit to do. Like this is what we're talking about today. Like they're going to need rooms to meet in. So and Trump knows that. And so but that's just my idea, the efficient way to handle it.
Well, one thing's for sure is whoever's in next, if it's a Democrat, they're not going to keep the name, the Donald Trump Ballroom.
Yeah.
All right.
Well, we're going to take,
do you want to take a break and then bring in David?
Yeah, we're going to take a break and we're going to bring in David. We've got a lot to talk about. We're going to talk about redistricting. Are the Dems chickening out? Canada calls out U.S. Republicans. The Senate rebukes Trump on tariffs. And then we may talk about a new report out saying Democrats aren't moderate enough, which I'm sure David will have some thoughts of when we get back.
Big moments deserve less stress and more confidence. When ED shows up in the bedroom, HIMS helps you keep your cool and focus on what matters most. The moment, not the worry. Through HIMS, you can access personalized prescription treatment options for ED like hard mints and SexRx plus Climax Control if prescribed. HIMS offers access to ED treatment options ranging from trusted generics that cost 95% less than brand names to hard mints if prescribed. You shouldn't have to go out of your way to feel like yourself. HIMS brings expert care straight to you with 100% online access to personalized treatment plans that put your goals first. This isn't one-size-fits-all care that forgets you in the waiting room. It's your health and goals put first, with real medical providers making sure you get what you need to get results. Think of HIMS as your digital front door that gets you back to your old self with simple 100% online access to trusted treatments for ED and more, all in one place. To get simple online access to personalized, affordable care for ED, weight loss, and more, visit hims.com/majority. That's hims.com/majority for your free online visit. hims.com/majority. Actual price will depend on product and subscription plan. Featured products include compounded drug products, which the FDA does not approve or verify for safety, effectiveness, or quality. Prescription required. See website for details, restrictions, and important safety information. All right. We are going to bring in David Hogg here. David is a former DNC vice chair and the co-founder and a board member at March for Our Lives, and the co-founder and president of Leaders We Deserve. David, good to see you.
Good to see you too. How are you, Jason?
I am good. Thanks for joining. So I'm gonna ask you the first question here, and then we'll go into a little more news of the day. But I want to sort of set things with your perspective. So, for context for the audience, David was in Kansas City a couple of months ago, and I was asked by a local group to basically interview David in front of a crowd, and we got to talk for a little while beforehand, and I really enjoyed the conversation. And at one point in it, David, you said something that really stuck with me. And what it was is the conversation basically turned into a kind of a discussion about our two generational perspectives, right? So I'm 44. How old are you?
25.
You're 25. All right. So, and I've now reached an age where I say things like, it's energizing to be around young people and stuff like that. and what we were talking about was how, Ravi is close to my age. So, our generation, millennials, have nostalgia for a certain time in this country, and it drives a lot of our politics. A lot of our politics and the generations above us are driven by an idea of we've got to get back to some sense of normalcy. And I said that at one point, and you broke into a really persuasive and compelling argument about your generation having never really seen any of that normalcy and not having any sense of it. And I wanted to tee you up to start by talking about that perspective a little bit, because I think it drives a fair amount of your politics.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's important to note that for our generation, I don't think that there's ever really been a time where we've truly seen it, even a small segment of the country actually truly united in a bipartisan kind of fashion. I think the last time that kind of happened was in the wake of 9/11. And obviously that was by far only certain segments of the country that kind of came together. But for us, I was born a year before 9/11 happened. And my entire generation has seen crisis after crisis after crisis, where we lived through multiple once in a lifetime crises before we could even graduate from high school. And time again, we've seen how our government has failed in many, many, many instances to do the things that we were taught that it was supposed to do growing up, right? Whether it was the financial crisis and the greed and corruption that enabled that and caused many of us to, many members of my generation, to have their parents have their homes foreclosed on, or that was the pandemic that forced many young people like my sister and others to not have prom, not have graduation, not have homecoming, not have their senior, junior, freshman, sophomore years of high school. And how that theme of being promised one thing and completely seeing something very different as our reality, I think is largely what has dictated our generation's political upbringing more than anything. And I think what we're seeing, especially in the wake of the last election, with young voters shifting to the right, my metaphor for that that I've really rested on is when you feel like you were 10 feet underwater because you're probably not going to be as well off economically as your parents. You're not going to be able to own a home. You're not going to be able to afford to pay off your college debt until you're 50 or 60 years old. You're not going to be able to even afford to have a family a lot of the time. If you feel like you're 10 feet underwater and you're hearing from one group of people, well, what if you like the Democratic Party, what if you were 9 feet underwater instead of 10 feet underwater? That's not a compelling message. And especially when they say, well, the other side wants to put you at 11 feet underwater. And it's like, I don't care how underwater I am. I still can't breathe. We want to see an answer of what a political party is doing to actually bring needed change to our country so that we can be as well off as our parents were at a minimum, instead of the current state of affairs that we're in right now as a country.
The underwater analogy is such a good analogy because political pundits and like the pundit class wants to talk about the Democratic Party on a spectrum that goes from moderate to progressive. And what I hear you saying is like, that is all irrelevant to us, basically.
Yeah, and I should have finished my metaphor. I'm sorry, I got off track. What happened last election in terms of like that shift of young people to the right is, I think when you're underwater like that, you're going to reach out for any hand that you think is the most likely to bring you to the surface. No matter if it's on the left side or the right side of you, you want somebody you're going to listen to whoever says in the most compelling fashion possible that they're going to immediately and dramatically bring change to the system so that you can breathe again. And I think that's kind of what's happening. And that's why we're seeing such back and forth in the polls of young people going for, being increasingly for Trump. And then now that we've seen how he's governed, being against him. We are, as a generation, we're not interested in partisan politics. We're interested in getting shit done and actually seeing results that make it easier for us to exist. And that's, I think, part of the dichotomy that we're seeing here is that the traditional pundit class, like you mentioned, thinks of this as like a left, right, center type of spectrum. When I think increasingly what we're seeing is it's not about left versus right. It's about top versus bottom. Are you an outsider that's trying to rise up and change the political system? Donald Trump certainly is somebody who has communicated that to people clearly very successfully, that he's not part of that system. He obviously is a criminal and a horrible person, but he's clearly communicated to people that he is not part of the status quo. And I think to many people that's why we saw a crossover between the Bernie bro voter and then the Trump who also voted for Trump. For them, it's top versus down. It's not left versus right. It's about getting things done as quickly as possible that are going to make their lives easier.
One thing I've been wondering a lot is, you saw this as somebody who was a student who got engaged on the issues of gun violence and now has gotten engaged on a whole host of issues. And, I used to be a school principal, and you're right at the age of the students that I taught and started with middle school, like literally within 1 year of that age. And I what you're saying resonates a lot with the experience of a lot of my students. I think the thing that keeps me up at night a lot, and the debate I want to have in the next 2 to 3 years, that's like the version of the abundance argument that isn't being had yet, which I know everybody's been debating this abundance agenda with housing and all that, is education, K-12 education, right? Because you're 25 now, so you're now at this age now where you're looking back and there's a new generation coming through the schools. And what has bothered me a lot about our party is how little we have to say about how to improve our public education system. And I think about the New York City mayoral election, where I legitimately didn't have a candidate in the race, because on the one hand, we had Cuomo, who was part of this system. And it's Cuomo and de Blasio, which is interesting. I know you've been very engaged in this, which is what I bring up New York, is like you had Cuomo and de Blasio who presided over, per pupil spending, which basically doubled over a 20-year period adjusted for inflation, and saw actually results go down and more people leave the system in New York City. And so you had this guy with a terrible track record there. And then you had Mamdani, who either didn't have a lot to say about education, or in the case of mayoral control, wanted to relinquish control over this really important job that he has, which is to educate kids, and cut off the supply lines of the few things within the city that were working. And I was left here saying, okay, here's this energetic guy who's engaging a lot of young people, and then this other kind of dinosaur who has all these other flaws, but and neither of them have a lot to say about education. And even more troubling, when I ask supporters of each, they don't even know what the policies are of either of those candidates on education. And it's not just a New York problem. Like if people were to say, what's Kamala Harris's education policy? What was Joe Biden's education policy? None of our candidates, with a few exceptions, are visionary on this question. And so I'm like, what about that next group of kids? What are we doing for them? You know what I'm saying? That's what worries me.
Well, I think clearly COVID had an extremely negative effect on many young people's education. And I don't think that our government has provided a accurate answer to solve the educational crisis that we're in right now. That came with a lot of young people being, in online school, and the developmental challenges that come with that, with their emotional development, to the academic challenges. And I think the foundation of any of that in the first place is having good childcare. It's having things like universal pre-K and everything like that, which from my understanding, at least in New York City, they have universal pre-K that was implemented. I think it was under de Blasio, but Zoran focused more, one of the main parts of his policy platform was universal childcare, which obviously parents are really struggling with right now to pay for in the city. I remember a younger mom coming up to me when I was in Washington Square Park with Zoran. And she was asking questions about all kinds of stuff. And I asked her how much her childcare was. And I think she said it was like she went to every place possible to try to get the lowest price for, I think it was 2 kids that she had. It was something insane, I want to say $3,000 or $4,000 or $5,000 a month, or something incredibly high like that. And when parents are struggling that much and they're having to dedicate that much time to go to work to pay for their child's care, and they can't spend as much time with them, it's going to hurt their development. And what I'll say is I'm not the expert on education by any means. I would leave that to somebody like my mom, who's taught for over 20 years to help determine that. But I think one thing that Democrats certainly should be focused more on in general are issues that everybody agrees on, but nobody is really focused on improving that much. For example, we could easily focus on getting graduation rates from high schools up easily, right? And I don't know how much of that is necessarily just a funding issue. Certainly we need teachers like my mom to be paid more, for sure. But we need to make sure that we're putting the right structures in place so that young people have the resources they need so that they can graduate at a higher level without lowering the standard, so that we're not just like lowering the bar that they have to cross in order to graduate in the first place. And what I'll say about Zoran is, besides helping to lay the foundation of what I would say anybody needs for a good education, which is early childhood development, good childcare, and everything like that, he asks people in a way that I've never seen any other politician do before, with an incredible amount of humility, what do you need? And I think that's part of the reason he was so successful, and part of what Democrats can learn from his race. Even though not every city is New York City, he went out there and he directly asked voters when he was running, what do you want from your mayor of New York City? And used that to build his platform and his priorities. And I think continuing in that sense, what he can do is go and ask teachers, what do you need in order to succeed? And give your students the best possible chance to do as well as possible.
Yeah, the one thing I would hope for, and I think you might know him, and maybe maybe you don't know him as well as I think you do, but I think he's going to be mayor, obviously, and so my energy is like, I want this guy. I grew up in New York City. I want him to succeed, and he has definitely shown himself to be a learner, and I've seen that on a lot of issues. Like, some people like it, some people don't, but I like somebody who's clearly trying to do his best to hear people out. The one thing I would want, if he's listening, or to the extent you have a conversation with him, is those listening conversations are only going to work if you maintain the ability to run the schools. And one of the things he's promised is that he's going to kind of distill that down to like an unelected kind of community council or whatever. And that's one of those issues where I just think, and I'll be off this because I know this is not a New York City podcast. I think this is an important moment. There's so much attention on him. The people in this audience, even if they live in Missouri, are hearing about him. It's like, take your energy, take your learning, actually go out there and use the control that you have to, he cares a lot about poverty. There is no more important job to alleviate and reverse poverty than running great schools. And you don't want to give that up. You want to show that you could do that really well. So that's my positively framed message to Zoran, but we've got other things to talk about. Redistricting. So David, you've been involved in the party. It seems like both on the Illinois front and the Maryland front, Democrats appear to be walking away from the ability to potentially add some seats for Democrats. And I know there's some state level nuance here. I'm curious as to whether you have any opinions about whether Democrats should be a little bit more aggressive in some of these states.
We absolutely should be. We cannot unilaterally disarm, and we need to ensure that we're using every tool at our disposal to fight back against Donald Trump, and ensure that we actually have properly drawn maps, especially in the wake of something as essential as the Voting Rights Act being eviscerated by Donald Trump's Supreme Court. We can't leave anything off the table right now when we say that we're fighting against somebody that we believe is, who, not just that we believe, but who's said that his advisors like Steve Bannon have said that he's going to go for a third term. We can't leave anything off the table to ensure that so long as it is within legal bounds for us to do that we are not unilaterally disarming and trying to fight with one hand tied behind our back. To be clear, the type of gerrymandering that is going on, the partisan gerrymandering, should not be legal. This should not be the case. I don't want it to be the case. But ultimately, the Supreme Court sets the rules of this, and ultimately we cannot leave anything off the table when we know how harmful Donald Trump is being.
What's your status like? I'm familiar enough to know that you were at the DNC.
Mm-hmm.
This is a good test of just what distills down, because I'm not a big avid watcher of the sort of DNC politics. My sort of what's trickled down is that you were pushing for, or at least you dabbled in discussions of primarying people, and that led to a shitstorm. That is all I know. Educate us on where we are on this question.
And led to the work you're doing now. So David, feel free to just segue that into
Leaders We Deserve. The bottom line is I was doing this work at Leaders We Deserve before I ran to be a vice chair of the DNC. The vice chair is a volunteer role. And historically, it is when there is a Democratic nominee for president, like President Biden, they tend to appoint people like governors and members of Congress, other people like that, senators, to be vice chairs. Before I ran, I read the bylaws to see if what I was doing at Leaders We Deserve could be even possible with me being a vice chair, because we do engage in primaries. It is my job. And I read the bylaws, and it said that you couldn't be involved in the presidential primary at all, which makes sense to me, especially after what we saw in 2016. But it didn't say anything about being involved in other primaries. So I thought that was fine because it wasn't against the rules. And there had been people like Gretchen Whitmer and Tammy Duckworth who were vice chairs before me who had their own PACs, similar to what I have, although this is my job. And given that, and the fact that I answered hundreds of questions throughout multiple town halls and talked to practically every DNC member that gave me their phone number, which was hundreds of them multiple times, and this question did not come up outside of talking about what the bylaws stated, I figured it was fine. And then I was elected to this position, and we announced that as soon as Chair Martin had his first meeting, he told us that we were not to be involved in any primaries whatsoever, and that we were to sign a pledge saying that we would not be involved in any primary at any level in any way, shape, or form. The problem is, this is my literal job, and this is what I was doing long before I even running for the vice chair of the DNC was on my radar. And when it came down to it, essentially, I was given the option of choosing between my values and what I thought we needed to do to win back young people, or remaining in a largely symbolic and ceremonial role that is unpaid and volunteer, obviously, at the DNC, and I chose my values. So they decided to redo the election, which in my opinion was an awfully convenient way of essentially of getting rid of me, because they said there was a procedural issue with the election, when in reality, I believe what happened is they knew that if they changed the bylaws, they would need a 2/3 majority in order to remove me. So by simply redoing the election and saying that there was issues with how it was conducted in the first place, it offered a simple way to remove me with a simple majority. And when it came down to it, I decided not to run for re-election because we have bigger things to focus on. And I'm going to continue sticking to my values. We're going to challenge a few Democratic incumbents with the work we do at Leaders We Deserve, and they're going to be in safe Democratic seats, but we're also doing work to help win back the House. We're supporting Randy Villegas in California's 22nd Congressional District, one of the most competitive currently held by Republican seats in the country. And we're going to be supporting a number of other red to blue seats around the country as well. But I don't believe that the current Democratic Party that we have is the best that we can get, certainly from our members of Congress. And I don't think that we're going to get better simply by asking them to get better, or talking about how we can get our comms to be better. I think sometimes it's not a matter of the message, it is a matter of the messenger. And the resources that I think we lack in our party more than anything are two things: courage and competition. I want us to foster a culture of competition where somebody like Shri Tanadar in Michigan, who has such bad constituent services, that other members of Congress are having to tweet at him to get his act together because his own constituents are going to those other members of Congress, should not be in Congress. When he's spending nearly $1 million in taxpayer dollars on self-promotional ads for his campaign, and he's voting to enrich Donald Trump by things like the Genius Act and other crypto bills, that is a problem, and he should not be there. And that's why we've announced a challenge against him.
I think, Jason, I was going to bring up the welcome pack stuff later, but I think it's a good time to bring it up now, because I think this is a question of, first of all, like, David, I think, I don't know each other, but I think, like, I'm more moderate than you. I have no doubt about that. But everything you said, I agree with. I think we should have the competitions. I think that we shouldn't be afraid of competitions. We shouldn't be afraid of primaries. Jason and I were talking about this in the context of Maine. We had a slight difference of like immediate gut reaction to some of the early conversations in Maine. And we both were like, that's what a primary is for. Like, and I think, like, I'm not offended by primaries. I think that they should happen and they should be robust. And when whoever wins, I'm a loyal Democrat, I'm going to go with that person. Whether it's the progressive candidate or the moderate candidate. And I have this on my mind because the Welcome Pack, I'm sure you're following this discourse, put out this report, and they have a lot of data around, like, what are the perceptions of the Democratic Party. We can go through some of it to the extent like we're interested in the details, but I think the big headline is they think the party has moved too left by their definition. And I think it's interesting in a precise way because of the way they talk about gun control. And then there's a more general way. I suspect, before we get to the general point, that you have some thoughts on the inclusion of the assault weapons ban, both of you actually, because, like, these are people who are generally like my kindred spirits on a lot of things. Although I just sent them a message on this. I think the inclusion of the assault weapons ban, even for me, where there's a lot of the other things they say around, some of those things are making sense to me. I don't view the assault weapons ban as a unpopular opinion, but I'm sure this has been one of the dominant ways in which you've been interacting with this report. So I'm curious as to whether you have opinions on how they characterize the assault weapons ban.
I've not read the full report, so it's hard for me to comment on that. What I will say is I don't think that there is any voter where their top voting issue is guns, I don't think is going to vote for Democrats. If you want to protect your AR-15, you already are never going to vote for a Democrat, period.
Right.
You're not going to trust them if that is your top issue. I think what we need to focus on in the Democratic Party is, of course, I support an assault weapons ban. I think we need it. I think we need a much higher standard of ownership in this country. I think if you want to own a firearm, you should need a similar level of training as somebody in the National Guard. If you want to be part of the well-regulated militia, you should need to know how to use that firearm and be able to call up for the government to be able to call you up to arms to be able to defend the country and stand up to things like insurrection, as was talked about, even in the most originalistic of interpretations in the Second Amendment. And I think what we need to focus on is, of course, the assault weapons ban is important. We know that most gun deaths are caused by handguns, and they are suicides. That doesn't mean that we can't do anything about it. There actually is a lot that we can still do about that. But what I want Democrats to break out of is this idea that we can only focus on how somebody gets a gun or why they're pulling the trigger. Republicans like to focus on why are they pulling the trigger. Typically, it's talking about mental health as a scapegoat after a mass shooting, typically as a white mass shooter, to be like, oh, this person was not a white supremacist like the shooter at my high school. Clearly, if you shoot up a high school, you're not mentally well. But it's also possible for you to be mentally ill and a Nazi, like the shooter at my high school was. He was literally drawing swastikas on things and talking about how much he hated minorities and said all kinds of anti-Semitic stuff. Hatred is not a mental illness. And what I wish we focused on was, even though there's a lot of stuff that we may not agree on, let's figure out what we can do when we are empowered to help reduce gun deaths, like funding more gun violence research to help figure out how to reduce gun suicides, funding more programs so that when somebody comes into a hospital with a loved one who has been shot, that they get counseling from somebody in that community so they don't go and retaliate. Not only because that's just the right thing to do, but because it fucking saves us money. If that's all you care about in the most cynical, disgusting terms, it saves us money and it saves the lives of law enforcement by having fewer shootings in the first place. If you can get somebody counseling so they don't go and retaliate, so that they can get a job, so they don't feel the need to go and rob somebody. Because guess what? If you prevent that shooting, you then prevent endangering the lives of the law enforcement that have to respond. You prevent endangering the lives of the life of the person who would get shot and now isn't. And you save millions of dollars by not incarcerating that person for the rest of their life and paying for all of the downstream effects that come with that, of children who then have one less parent, of children who struggle to get by because there's less economic support for them, and so many downstream effects. And that is what we need to focus on, not just saying, oh, we can only talk about the things that we don't agree on. There's a lot of stuff that we can do on guns that we are not doing right now, that we could get done in a bipartisan way that can save lives. And we did that after Uvalde and Buffalo, where we passed the first bipartisan gun law in 30 years. And we saw since the passage of that law a 25% reduction in gun homicides. That's nowhere near enough, but it's a hell of a lot better than the track that we were on previously. And the challenge that Democrats have is that we stop a lot of terrible stuff from happening. You do not get rewarded for the shooting that does not happen, or the hurricane that does not happen 10 or 20 years from now, even though we know it saves us money, even though we know it is the right thing to do. It's harder politically to do that. And what we need to focus on, even if it's not guns that we're focused on in an election, I know sometimes it's going to be harder in some districts to focus on that. What we need to be focused on right now is getting as much power as we can and figuring out when we do elect more moderate Democrats like a Jared Golden, who I certainly do not agree with on most things. He didn't support the assault weapons ban when he was first elected, but guess what? He got elected, and after there was a horrific mass shooting that happened in Lewiston, Maine, he came around and supported the assault weapons ban and still was reelected and still outperformed Trump.
Well, this gives me, what you're saying gives me hope, because I'm this person who cares more, and I know Jason feels the same way, about unity and effectiveness than anything else. And I think from a cross-generational perspective, I think you and Liam, who runs the Welcome Pack, and amongst other people, have so much in common and a lot to talk about. You're not going to agree on everything, but what I think and what I'm hearing from you is they love to talk about Golden, not necessarily him, but they always, Iglesias and these type of people always bring up Golden as this example of like, we got to protect this guy and all that. And like, and I don't really have a strong opinion. I've only met the guy once, but what I hear is you want to win. to get power, because power gets us the things that we all care about, and we might have difference 30% here, 30% there. So I think, like, when you have time, I think it would be worth reading. I think you're going to disagree with a lot in it. I think you're going to agree with certain things. Somebody pointed out that some of the things in this thing are like things Bernie would have advocated for back in the day, and that Hillary would have hated, and vice versa. Things change a lot. Even I, the moderate that I am a big supporter of Medicare for all. So even I disagree with them on the Medicare for all question. But they have interesting things to say about the way we use language and certain things like land acknowledgements that the DNC kind of turned voters off. And it's like all kind of inside baseball stuff that I'm not familiar with. I think you'd find it very interesting. And the discourse has been dominant on the internet this week. So at the very least, you'll be clued into that. But I think this gets to this question, Jason, of the intergenerational nature of this, which is our job isn't to fight each other. It's to learn from each other. Right. And I think you're so good at this.
Well, one of the reasons that I wanted to bring David on is because I had a preconceived notion that it was probably projection by me of David before I got to meet him. And half of that, preconceived notion was, hey, here's a young hard charger who wants to, be in charge of everything one day. And after talking to him for a while, I realized, no, actually, this is a young hard charger who probably doesn't want to be in charge of everything, but is super pissed off about, what's going on with his generation and wants to make sure that there are good people in charge at some point. So that was the first thing. That was the first preconceived notion that was blown up. And then the other was probably because of his age, was just that, he would be more on what this report is talking about, more of the justice-oriented tilt of the party and less of the sort of populist, what people's daily lives are like thing, and I'm not even saying, like, I'm not a person who's like against, I'm not one of these people out there like there's too many letters in LGBT. I don't care. I'm all for everybody being treated the way that they want to be treated. So like, that's not a thing that bothers me, but I am a person who recognizes it's not always the most effective messaging. And it was interesting to talk to David and to realize that he's like, yeah, I want to win so that I can like get a house one day, or like my generation could buy a house, or so that, and so David, I'm going to let you speak for yourself, but I actually think, Ravi, that when he reads the report, there's a lot of stuff where he's going to be like, yeah, there's good things we could do if we could just win.
It's like an elders and younger person thing. And David, in the next 10 years, you're going to have a horrific realization that you're transitioning into our older people group, and you're going to take it from both sides. Like we got our parents who are pushing us, and then we got people like you who are pushing us. So you'll be there soon, and it'll be fun.
David, go ahead.
Yeah.
I mean, I think, as you can imagine, there are two parts of me that fight each other a lot. And there's the gun violence advocate, the advocate against gun violence, the survivor of gun violence part of me that is like, screw a candidate like Jared Golden. I don't care. He doesn't support the assault weapons ban. We should not support him. He should not be elected. But over time, there is the part of me that has learned and looked at candidates like him, as much as I do not agree with him on so much stuff. And I acknowledge the fact that in the current state of affairs for our democracy, it is better to have a candidate that is 10 or 20% of the way there with us on policy issues than zero. And even if they aren't doing anything, if they aren't actively repealing gun laws, that's still helping to at least stop it from getting worse. And once they're there, we can then push them to have the courage to support stronger gun laws when the moment comes. But without that power, we can't do anything at all. And this is one of the really big challenges that our party has to face, is the fact that we know that when you have a system of government with something like the Senate that is designed to protect land, basically, or represent land more than it is people, you're going to have a more conservative form of government. And it's going to be harder to have power in that moment. But what we have to, I think, overall, what we need to do first and foremost is win, even if it means having a candidate like Jared Golden being able to win there. But I also think, and I don't know if this report really acknowledges it, I kind of doubt it, but I haven't read it, obviously, so I don't know. We need to ask ourselves, why are we forced into making these decisions when it comes to House members being more moderate or not to get a majority in the first place? And the reason why is because of, I would argue, gerrymandering, where we have lost so much ground with our state legislatures that we've been drawn out of power. by these state legislatures, so that we are forced into being like, well, can we support a Jared Golden? Can we support a Marie Perez? Can we support these really moderate candidates? Because right now, to have a majority in the House, we're going to need candidates like Jared, who are able to outperform in Trump plus 3 or 4 or 5 districts, right? That Trump won by 4 or 5% in order to get a majority. And it forces us in our to make some uncomfortable decisions and who to support. But ultimately, it's better for us to have any amount of power than nothing at all, because not every place is necessarily New York City. Not every person necessarily supports the assault weapons ban. And it makes me really uncomfortable to say that, to be honest with you, because there's the part of me that's like, well, they just need to be there. But the most important thing is we need to actually have the power to be able to push them. Because think about it this way, right? When it came to the Affordable Care Act, if we said, okay, we are not going to vote for anybody who does not support single payer, and we're not going to support them, we're going to make sure that they don't, like, basically don't get elected or get any support. Sure, we would have remained committed to that principle, but it's very unlikely that we would have had the votes that we ended up needing to pass the Affordable Care Act and have people sacrifice their careers and know they were sacrificing their careers for something much bigger, which was millions of Americans getting coverage for pre-existing conditions and getting health care. And now that is one of the strongest points that Democrats have, because we know from some of the reports that came out of Blue Rose, for example, after the election, that one of the few things that one of the top 5 issues, there's a really depressing matrix. I don't know if you guys have it or can pull it up, but there's a really depressing matrix of the issues that Democrats are trusted more on than Republicans, and also the number of the issues that, like, voters overall care most about. And out of the 5 issues that voters said that they cared most about in that matrix, the only one that they cared more about of basically the 5, I think it was, that they showed, and Democrats were trusted more on, was healthcare. And it's because of the Affordable Care Act. And if we had a policy saying we're not going to support anybody that doesn't support single payer, we're not going to get them elected, sure, maybe one day we'll get to that point as a country, but we would be in an environment right now where millions of Americans would not have healthcare, and millions more, probably 1 million plus more, would be dead early right now because of them not having coverage for pre-existing conditions.
Well, David, we got to let you go, but this was really wonderful. Anything you want to plug really quickly before we send you off?
The last thing I want to say is when we supported Zoran in that race, one of the challenges that came with it is I knew that there would be donors that would be upset about it. Leaders We Deserve is supported by 230,000 individual donors around the country. And the reason why people get a lot of emails and texts from us is because we need independence. Because I had 2 donors call me after we supported Zoran, one who had pledged 6 figures to us and another who had previously given us a very substantial amount of money in a similar range, both of whom said they were no longer going to support the organization because we supported Zoran. And I was only able to say to them, that's fine, it is what it is. And we're going to stick to our values of supporting somebody like that who outperformed Kamala Harris with 18 to 29-year-old voters by 3 times, because the vast majority of our money, well over 80% of it, comes from people that give less than $1,000. So if people can support our work, I'm actually about to be on the road. Over the course of 2 days, I'm going to 3 states to support 3 of our candidates that have their elections on Tuesday. If people can support us at leaderswedeserve.com with $10 or $15 a month, hopefully, or just making a one-time contribution of whatever year it is, it's 2025, so $25 to support us, it would go a long way to really help us continue to have that independence and continue to work as an organization to support candidates who are not just supported by the donor class, but are supported by the exact type of voters that we need to win more of.
Well, thanks, David. We really appreciate it, man.
Yeah.
Thank you. I will jump in and say, I think I've given a couple grand to Leaders We Deserve. So
there you go.
There's my
well, Jason, I was chatty today. I was just so excited to talk to this guy.
I knew the reason I really wanted to have David on was to watch the 2 of you talk, because while your politics they're not as different as you probably would assume, but they are what they have in common more than anything is neither of you have any use whatsoever for waiting your turn, staying in your lane, or you have no respect for institutions that aren't working, like the party itself, or people who have been in office a very long time, and all the mail that gets addressed to their house starts with HON period for honorable. Like neither of you are bowled over by that, and so I think over time y'all might find a lot of things to work on together.
Well, yeah, and here's the thing, like, I was thinking to myself, because you have this report out, and it's like advised by Pluff and Liz Smith and Axe and all these like people. So most of them are like in a different generation, obviously. And then you have David, and I was expecting him to be like dismissive of it. Obviously, he hasn't read it, but like he doesn't seem like he will be. And to me, that tells me something, which is, and it's not that the report's right. Actually, I was reading it. I was expecting to agree with more of it, but I respect the people who put it together, like Liam and his team and Axe and all that. I have like this sense that both we need to hear from our elders and from the young people. And I think that's part of what it means to have like a good coalition, but also like a good society, is that the elders are respected for the wisdom that they've accumulated, and the young people are respected for their ownership over the future and their energy and their willingness to challenge convention. And I think if things are really working when those two sides are communicating with respect. And I was glad to hear from him on that, because I really do come away with, I don't know him, but I come away with a lot of respect there. And the people I mentioned in that report, like are people I really respect too. And the online discourse is so polluted about it. When I looked at it, everybody's like fighting about it. I'm like, let's just have the conversation, you know?
When I met David, I was prepared to meet a person who would be sort of from the best way for me to describe it as a liberal from the middle of the country, who would have sort of a coastal, I know he's from Florida, but I went to school on the East Coast too. So what am I talking about? But but sort of a semi-coastal.
I love you call DC the East Coast. It
it
is the coast, but we could think of it differently.
But like, sort of a coastal, like moral superiority over people who aren't as progressive. And that's not what I found at all. What I found instead was a guy who was like looking around the room, at all the people on his side of the aisle and saying, do you all think this is working? Because it's not working. And it hasn't been working my entire life. And I'm pissed that everybody is acting like this is working. And
yeah.
And and that's where his urgency comes from. And I share that urgency, which is why afterwards I gave money to leaders we deserve. So I was excited to have him on.
I know we got to roll. My one impression is like, you only know, I don't follow him like on purpose. I follow him through what is thrown at me from the media. And what I'm aware of is that he came into our lives probably while we had this pod. I don't remember. Well, maybe immediately after that, where he was part of this group that obviously this tragic thing happened to. And then he immediately transitions into young adulthood, where he's facing a different series of expectations, and he's seizing the moment. So it's like a combination of the two. And I find that combination interesting, because both he has chosen to be out there. So in some ways he has to be ready for it, but also he's young enough that if you think about yourself, like that is a lot of working shit out with a huge profile that you have to do. And so like I'm listening to him and I'm like, oh, this 25-year-old version of him is just one of an evolving version of somebody who wants to play a meaningful part in the direction of the party. And the person who we probably talked to today is probably even different than the one a year ago. Right. And I think that's, I don't know. It's interesting. I'm glad we had him on. It was really interesting to talk to him. Yeah.
Yeah. I totally agree. So, all right. We got a minute.
Well, I'm in south of France at a tennis camp. I did my 2 months in Italy. I just wrote about it, so people can hear about it there. But I basically just finished my first leg of my 2 months of cooking school. It was really wonderful, and I've talked about some of it on this pod. But I'm doing a couple weeks here, and then I'm back stateside, and I'll be cooking Thanksgiving dinner for my family, and then doing a little pop-up dinner for my friends, where we're inviting a New York Times food critic to come. Yeah. So it's going to get serious out there.
And write about it, or just
send me the review. We're still waiting on the confirmation, but it's Hodari's friend, so I'm pretty sure he'll do it.
That's cool.
And I'm just going full in on it. And I've been only potting and reading the news in a deep way once a week, and I find it really good for my mental health, because I'm trying to attach the news to what I can do about it. And right now, my main mechanism of change is talking to our audience here and then on Lost Debate. And so I've compartmentalized it and go deep each week, once a week. And what that means is I am a happy person a lot of the time, because I am not just pinging it all the time. I'm reading it in one fell swoop once a week. So that's been helpful. Yeah.
That's that's basically how it works for me. Is you create these outlines, and so that's why I've been able to remain mostly mentally healthy about the news, because I have the luxury of that's how this show is for me all the time. But you have the other podcasts you've done over the last few years and everything. So, okay, so I have two updates. One, I mean, neither of which are particularly
Dude, a
important.
lot of baseball happening. I hope I hear about like you're like the way I am for news to you, you are to baseball to me. It's like I'm aware that there's a lot of baseball stuff happening, but
Well, for me personally as well. I mean,
yours and I'm seeing your content and the Dodgers actually all on your feed. That's all the baseball I get. I get both. Yeah. And then how hot your wife is. I actually had Sujit, our mutual friend. I was just on the phone with him before this recording, and he was like, I really love how Jason just after all these years is just like, my wife is hot. And he just wants everybody.
Well, the internet was saying so, and I was like, "Yeah, I know."
It's just the best.
Yeah,
It's
so I'll talk about both things. The baseball thing. So, for those who listen all the time, know that I play men's league adult baseball, not softball, and so I sometimes I play with an over 18 team. Most of the time, I play with either over 30 or over 40. And the end of my season was I went down and played in the over 40 men's baseball league World Series, which is a real thing. And it's in Arizona. I do it each year. And this year I went pretty much with my Kansas City team, plus a few other guys. One of which actually was JD Schulten, who we've had on the show a couple of times, who's also a pro, minor league baseball player. He pitched a game, but unlike what he usually gets to do in pro ball, he also got to play the field and hit. And he's quite good at that. It turns out when you have a guy who is a good enough athlete to pitch and be paid for it, he's also a really, really good hitter. And so that was really fun to do with him. I wish we had won more of our games, but it was I played well and had a great time with my friends. And in the fifth of the sixth games, I turned my ankle really hard. And it blew up all swollen. But I'm really lucky because I didn't break anything, and everybody who saw it was like, I was sliding into second, and my metal cleat caught on the base, and it just did things it's not supposed to do. So I'm limping around a little bit, but it's going to get better. Okay, so that's baseball. My screen just gave a thumbs up because that's baseball. And that's, well, what I will say about that, actually, to sort of put a little cap on that thought, is that there was a moment. So the last game I couldn't play because of my foot, so I was just like coaching first base, and I, these guys that I play with, I've played with them for a few years now, and they're some of my closest friends. And there was a moment where it's the last game. We've been eliminated. We're not going to go on. We know we're eliminated, and we're losing the game by like 4 runs in the bottom of the ninth. The game is out of hand, and it's a meaningless game. And one of my, best pals on the team, and best pals generally, this guy Ryan, he hits like a grounder to short. Ryan's 42 years old, and he's running as hard as he can. Now, he's hurt his knee in this tournament pretty bad. He's running as hard as he can. He's out by about a step. And I notice as he's heading back to the dugout, like he's in severe pain. And then the next guy comes up, Michael, and he's out by a half step on a grounder, and he's running so hard that he actually, rather than slow down, he goes down the right field line. He just sort of slides head first out in the dirt, like
oh my God,
or out in the grass, And I realized in that moment, like, why it's not just that I love baseball, but I realized in that moment that the reason I do this is that after leaving the Army, I was sort of looking for a place in civilian life where I could be with other people who just wanted to give everything they have to a group, even at their own physical, expense. And it occurred to me right then, like, oh, that's why I love this. It's not just that I love baseball, which I do. It's that, like, I found my tribe with these fellow psychopaths. And it was just kind of a cool.
It's all about, and there's so much to what you're saying. We could do a whole pod about it, and I know we're running out of time, but it honestly, like, I wrote about this week, like in the newsletters, like about cooking and this final few days we had together, and we're cooking, and it's this Italian woman and this Chinese woman and this guy from Louisiana, and we all, like, there's nothing better than the feeling of whatever you're doing it with a group of people, and you're looking out for each other and you're rooting for each other, and it's hard. Like, it has to be hard. like you're saying. Like it
Right.
really has to test you. And there's few things in this world more beautiful than that, outside of the obvious, like, so it's like, yeah, I feel you, man.
My Uncle John always says that other than really great sex, the greatest thing in the world is making stuff with your friends.
Yes.
And it's so true. The other thing you mentioned, because if I don't actually explain it, then without context, it sounds strange. That just my wife being hot, that being a thing that happened this week, is that. So Diana, for those who don't know, is an author and a keynote speaker, and she's her career has really taken off the last few years, and she has a big following, and she does big events to big crowds on a regular basis. In fact, she now has more Instagram followers than I do.
That's
And
amazing.
and she this week there was a video that her team put up of her just giving us a recent speech where she's talking about a lesson learned from the founder of or the guy who created the cinder block and what he learned 17 years later when he changed the cinder block. But what happened was this was already a popular thing, and then it sort of it went viral, and then when it went viral, it went to all sorts of people who were consuming this content not just because of the business lessons of it. And I think what happened is it went into two separate algorithms.
I didn't know this back then.
So one of the algorithms that it obviously went into was people who watch videos about business and lessons and these sort of things. And those people commented and had the comments you'd expect. The other half, I think, were just dudes who like good-looking women. And so it just became like half the comments are about my wife's butt. And
it's probably good for the followers.
I told her, I was like, yeah, she's not bothered by it. She's like, if anything,
you and your wife
flattered.
both look exactly what your photo from when you guys were in high school is funny to me. It's like, yeah, your clothes are different, but you guys look basically the same. It's funny to me.
I've always looked much older than my age, and she's always looked much younger, and that's fine. It's working great. And we're 6 weeks apart in age. But to your point, what happened was people were saying a lot of this, and rather than act like I didn't notice it, I was responding to people like in her comments. Like one guy was like, I can't concentrate at all with you in that outfit. She's just wearing a red dress, and I can't concentrate at all with you in that outfit. And I just replied, and this kind of took off. I replied to the dude, and I was like, hey, I get it. Unless she's wearing a winter coat and ski pants, I can't hear a word she says, and then the other joke I made was just that, like, that the world, like basically her going viral for being very fit and having a nice body. I said it feels kind of like when your favorite lesser known band becomes really popular all of a sudden, and you're like validated by the fact that it turns out everybody else also loves.
Yeah, you feel a certain way though. You feel a certain way.
You're also like, hey, I was here first. I was here all along, and so there were some people who didn't like that I was commenting on that, but I generally am just a person who I promote my wife and boost her up a lot.
Yeah, you're fairly secure from
Yeah.
all outward appearances.
So it was a pretty funny week. All right, there were some comments that we would read to each other that were hilarious. I mean, they were wrong, but between the two of us, we thought they were very funny. And so anyway, it was a weird week as far as that goes.
Well, Midas Mighty, I know this was more than you bargained for, but thanks for sticking with us. For those of you on YouTube, you could follow Majority 54 wherever you get your podcast. So subscribe. And Jason, I did this last week. I might as well do it again. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure you use yours today. There you go.